My name is Alisa. I am a consultant with LSAT Unplugged. I'm also a TA with LSAT Unplugged. I lead weekly workshops for admissions help with Ayaka, another consultant for LSAT Unplugged on Wednesday evenings if you're in the course. And you can also email us at any time if you have any questions about tonight. I see someone in the room. I think your name is Narisa. If you want to, you can unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat if you're here. Maybe you're not here. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of go through a few short things and see how it goes. Surely, if you're here, this will probably be about 10, 15 minutes. All right, so a little bit about me. I thought I would just take this time to share who I am, when I started studying for the LSAT, and things like that. I'm gonna try to see if I can fix my chat here so I can pull it out. Awesome. So write me in the chat if you have any questions at all. Okay, so I originally started studying for the LSAT as a self-studier. I was a full-time housekeeper before the COVID-19 pandemic and could not afford any sorts of LSAT classes. I didn't know that LSAT Unplugged existed yet. I had purchased the LSAT trainer from Amazon and was working my way through it and felt as though I had potential to take the LSAT and to do well. My game plan for my LSAT score, as well as my law school applications, was to just take the test and see what I can get, and also just apply to some local schools and see where I could go. I didn't have high hopes for myself. I did not have any sort of like personal people close to me with guidance. And so I just figured I would just get into a law school. And at the time, I didn't really care what law school. In the summer of the pandemic, I stopped working as a housekeeper because of contamination reasons. I felt unsafe. I didn't have good health insurance. Not that that's relevant to the LSAT, but I quit my job and I wasn't on unemployment. And Steve was hosting a free public writing essay workshop. He announced it on Facebook. I was in the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group, started to sort of creep on the Facebook group, as well as I would listen to his podcast regularly. When I found out he was hosting this free essay workshop, I joined the workshop. You know what? Actually, something happened before that, and I apologize for the lack of consistency in timeline. Steve was actually hosting a scholarship opportunity, which I've never seen him done, and I've not seen him do it since then. It was a really rare opportunity where he asked for a video submission of people speaking to him directly and stating what they would do with their law degree if they promised to go into public service, like human rights, working for others. It was at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is really important last summer, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. And Steve had given an opportunity to applicants that said, with this 4-minute video submission, what they would do to help human rights. I hope I'm saying that correctly. That's in my own words, not in his own words. So I created a video submission for him. I spent like an entire evening trying to create multiple different videos, and I sent my video in to Steve. I never met him. I never even spoken to anyone about what that submission should look like. I walked outside in my driveway and I just took a selfie video of myself. Looking back, it was really a silly video. I didn't do very well on it. He actually sent me an email and let me know I did not get the scholarship into the course. But with that email, he said, hey, Alyssa, you didn't get a scholarship into the course, but he offered me a spot in sort of a free workshop to talk about any current challenges that we are working on. So I scrambled to go to that workshop. And there I met a few other applicants and I met with Steve and we just shared challenges that we were working on. Fast forward, I ended up really wanting to be in the course. My fee waiver hadn't been approved yet. And I just waited. Once my fee waiver was approved, I used that discounted rate into Steve's course and found myself actually in the course. It wasn't until I was in the course that I started to realize that originally when I was a self-studier, I sort of like was taking the LSAT and I think this happens with a lot of students, like intuitively, I was getting a few questions right, which is what made me think, okay, I'm getting a few questions right. I'm sure enough, I can reach like a higher score. When I started taking the course with LSAT Unplugged, I really started to see the depth of what the LSAT is. And it was with that I started to also realize I actually had farther to go than maybe I originally thought I had to go. And I also had more opportunities. So with all of that being said, I've now been in the LSAT Unplugged course for August through June, so 10 months. I've been a TA with the course. I was part of the first group of TAs with the course in November. And these are some things that I wanted to share with you as someone who's been studying for the LSAT for a while. I've been studying for the LSAT for over a year. And some of my biggest lessons that I learned are this. There are in books and in the course, there's sort of like you learn how to do the LSAT, like you learn how to do games, you learn maybe question types of logical reasoning, you learn what they're looking for when they're asking for like identifying the flaw in logical reasoning. So you learn a lot of foundationals and basics in terms of what the test is actually asking you to do. What is the question stem asking you to do? What are they looking for in the correct answer choice? What will the correct answer choice do? And it's in learning those foundations that my study plan had asked me to start taking full section time sections. And this is actually what I taught my first class on ever as the first TA to ever teach a class in LSAT Unplugged. In November, I taught a class about what I did to close the gap between learning the foundations and suddenly sitting down to a fully timed section, because I found that I understood how to do the questions. I understood what question stems we're looking for in both games and logical reasoning. I'm not so much talking about reading comprehension here, but I am, and later I applied this same technique. I understand how to do things, and I was hitting almost like a traumatic response when I was sitting down with 35-minute time sections. I found that I was either freaking out or I was nowhere near finishing it in the time, and it was creating a lot of discouragement within me. And I found a gap in my own LSAT training. So I taught my first class on what I called deconstructed diagramming. Essentially what I did is for games, rather than trying to do 4 games in a row, I started, my dog is growling, excuse her. Rather than trying to do 4 games in a row within the 35 minutes, I started by diagramming the 4 games in a row. And I repeated that over and over and over again until reading the original stimulus and creating my own diagram was second nature, and I stopped having an emotional response to it. Then after I created those 4 diagrams in a row, I would then try to answer the questions based on my diagrams and what I had written alone. So I essentially covered the stimulus. I'll call the games A, B, C, D. There's 4 games in a section. I started diagramming A, checking, making inferences, checking the stimulus, and diagramming. B, checking the stimulus, making my inferences, setting my diagram up. I diagrammed C, and I would diagram D. I would not do any questions yet. After doing those 4 diagrams in a row, I have a question. Did I time myself for the diagrams? The first few times I didn't. Again, I was having an emotional response to being timed. I was finding myself almost like having a fight or flight response. And I was hearing that a lot with other students when they first learn how to do everything and then they go to timed. They keep sort of like, it was a repeated issue that I was hearing from other applicants saying that they were like panicking or it was causing distress So this is what I started with. I just set up the diagrams. After I set up those diagrams, what that did is it enabled me to get more comfortable. Then I would take a sticky note and actually place it on my computer screen and cover up the stimulus. And I would force myself to go through each game. I would try all of the questions in A, and then I would try all the questions in B, and then I would try all the questions in C, and then I would try all the questions in D. It feels a little clunky when I say it out loud, but by doing only diagrams for the stimulus, covering it up with a sticky note, and then answering only questions, I found something out. One of the biggest things I found out is it was the fastest, most surefire way I could test myself on gathering all the information necessary while writing my diagram. If I missed a clue, if I left out a detail, or if I didn't capture what I needed to when I set up the initial diagram, by covering it up with a sticky note, I found those flaws within myself faster, and I was able to fix those issues faster. Another thing that I found out when I started doing what I'm calling like deconstructed diagramming, in setting up all the games at once and then doing all the questions at once. And by the way, I don't do that anymore. That's not like a long-term test strategy. I don't actually do a 35-minute section like this. I'm just talking again about how I close the gap from knowing how to do games to being able to do games in 35 minutes. And this is how. Something that I really realized by doing only stimuli and diagrams, covering it up, and then doing all the answer choices is that there is a certain rhythm that the test has and between stimulus, and then the rhythm changes with each question. I taught a whole class on this, and so it's difficult to put into a quick session in terms of top things I found out while studying for the LSAT. But something I realized is that each question, and you can think about it, every single question has 4 wrong answers. If you are not emotionally prepared for that, then you're sifting through a question stem, a task, and 4 wrong answers. It's like being asked to like lift up like 100-pound boulders, like 5 of them, and 4 of them you don't need, and 1 of them you have to like run with. That's really tiring. And so if you're picking up all 5 100-pound boulders every single time, and you're not getting used to what a rhythm of 4 wrong answer choices looks like, it can be, I think, mentally and emotionally jarring to go into the rhythm of a stimulus, the rhythm of figuring out answers, the rhythm of a stimulus, the rhythm of figuring out answers. So when you're doing 4 games in a row for the first time, and you don't have that mental endurance for it, instead of that rhythm of the stimulus setup, rhythm of these 100-pound boulders of 4 wrong answers, it's a lot of work to go through 5 answer choices, and 4 of them are wrong every single time. If you just talking about it, I hope makes you tired, because it was making me tired. So stimulus, answer choices, stimulus, answer choices. To do all of that within the 35 minutes wasn't possible for me. So I deconstructed it. I did stimulus, 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 and then I just found this rhythm in all of the answer choices, because when I took away that interruption of diagramming each game one at a time, I figured out that the answer choices and the questions that they ask sort of like follow this pattern, like this mental patterning, this emotional patterning, and the questions start to repeat themselves and start to look alike. That's how I got rid of my traumatic response to doing 4 games in 35 minutes. I did a lot of stuff after that, but I'm also talking a lot. And if you really want to know, just email me or Ayaka at admissions@lsatunplugged.com. I don't know how long I did that for, the deconstructed diagramming, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. Please understand that that was 6-7 months ago, and I've since moved on to a different part of my journey with the LSAT, and I study differently now. That's my tip for beginners who are trying to close that gap. Another thing I want to say about my LSAT journey in the past year is to expect the way you study to change. when I was first learning things compared to when I needed to close that gap between learning it and full sections, to now that I am concerned and consistently able to work under 35 minutes. My binder looks different. My writing looks different. What I record looks different. The way I talk about it and think about it, it all looks different. So if you're finding that a certain way of working isn't working for you, kind of metaphorically, pack up all of the things that you have, study materials, and rework it. That's all I'm going to say about that. Any questions so far? We had questions in terms of timing myself for the diagrams. Not yet. I think it's actually surprising to a lot of people how long it's possible to wait before you start timing yourself, and how much foundation can be built in, and how much more time you can spend. I think I spent like another month. I know I spent a week straight doing deconstructed diagramming. And after just that 1 week straight of doing it, I was already stronger for it. Another tip that I have is organizing your study materials. And now if you're type A, this tip is not for you. If you're coming straight out of academia and you have a tremendous GPA, then maybe this tip is not for you. This tip is for me. I have professionally been an artist for the last 10 years. I've been one of the most organized artists I've ever met, which might explain why I'm interested in being an attorney. So I'm used to keeping a notebook. I'm used to being organized. I was also a housekeeper, so I am attentive to detail. But something I also was seeing in a lot of early on applicants, and what I had to learn for myself, is how to manage your study materials. If you take anything away from this session, I hope that you understand how important tracking your progress is. I started tracking in a binder. Once I got used to the binder, I moved my tracking, my Socratic review method, how long things were taking me once I did start to time myself, and I moved all of that to spreadsheets. Ayaka is really famous for her spreadsheets. She's amazing. I did it first. I'm just kidding. We studied together and we had spreadsheets. Ayaka's better at spreadsheets than me, but I still keep up with my spreadsheets. And that's what's really important. The reason I'm telling you to really prioritize the tracking of your progress is that some days I wasn't up to the task of taking on the LSAT. And if I hadn't been tracking myself, I wouldn't have been able to tell how much time I'd put in. Sometimes when we get tired, if you're managing a lot of jobs or you have personal responsibilities, social relationships that you need to upkeep or manage, a dog that's asking you for dinner, there are just times when you're tired, or I was tired, that if I didn't have a spreadsheet that just had every single day before it and how much time I had spent studying for the LSAT, I wouldn't have really been able to have that perspective. So please track what you do when you do it as much as you can. For me, that made all of the difference in terms of being able to try again. If once I open a spreadsheet and it takes me what feels like a year to scroll down just in my game section, I would gain that mental strength. I would gain that mental endurance and be like, holy cow, I can't believe I've been at this for 3 months. Also, I spoke about it with someone I was studying with today. She mentioned she was trying to get 4 games done and she loves games, but doing 4 in a row, just mentally, she doesn't have that tenacity yet to be able to complete all of them in one sitting. She was feeling really angry. She was feeling disappointed. And I made a suggestion to write that down when she's tracking, say, couldn't even make it through the 3rd game, really frustrated with myself. I sat there for 2 hours and was still in the 3rd game, was losing focus, concentration. And she said to me, Alisa, do I really write that I was frustrated and angry? Like, am I really tracking that? I was like, yeah, because you can be angry, you can be frustrated, and you're going to write that you sat there for 2 hours. And a week later, you can say, frustrated, angry, want to flip the table. And you can look and it says 1 hour and 45 minutes. And you're going to realize that even though it felt the same, by some force of putting in the work, you can be 15 minutes faster. I was like, what if What if one day you're angry and you're frustrated or you're tired and it says 59 minutes, and the next day it says exhausted, tired, sad, and it says 58 minutes? If you're just 1 minute faster and you're tracking that, then the next time you're angry, sad, you could be like, I bet I could get 1 minute off of that. What I'm trying to say is that studying for the LSAT is a really long process, and it's also a really layered process. And if you're not doing yourself the benefit of tracking like what you're spending time on, what your timing is, what your current issues are, then it's also hard to see how cool you are. And I think everyone should track their progress. I'm going to talk about some things that I stopped doing. Maybe I started doing at the beginning because I didn't know any better, and I stopped doing this. So these are some bad habits that I had that now I don't have anymore. One of them is rounding up, or like being vague about what I knew. Maybe I would do reading comprehension and remember a question from like 2 weeks ago if I had seen it, and get it correct. And I was using that as my score and saying like, that's my score, even though it is, but it's also not, because I had seen that question before. Really little detailed things like that. Like once you let go of trying to prove to yourself that you can take the LSAT, you're going to get better at the LSAT no matter what. If you're just really, really honest about exactly where you're at, exactly what your progress is at. That took me a long time. Another thing I stopped doing was eating at the same time I was studying for the LSAT. Now everyone's different. I don't know about Steve. I saw one of his emails one time that he was eating like energy drinks and soda and chips because that's just what was available to him. And he was prioritizing the test so much. That's just one blog post. Don't take that as truth for everything he did. But I used to maybe try to bribe myself like with a snack, or say like, I'm going to study during my lunch. And I just found out that it just doesn't work. I just wasn't retaining the information, especially a game. The better I got at the LSAT, the more I understood that there's a series of steps. It's kind of like stairs. Each question, there's a layer of things that I have to accomplish in order to answer the question correctly. Also, to get faster, there has to be a certain amount of strategy that you've had memorized, whatever the strategy that works for you. Some people do certain questions in a certain order. Some people approach some questions looking for the correct answer, and some questions eliminating the wrong answer. So knowing which tool to take out of my back pocket for each question takes a lot of my mind. And to be eating at the same time while I was doing it, I just found out that it doesn't work. So now I use the Pomodoro method for studying. I'll do 35 minutes on, 5 minutes off, or I'll do 50 minutes on, 15 minutes off. In my off breaks, I don't use my phone. I can't really send text messages because the 50 minutes on is so intense that the 15 minutes that I take off, really all I can do is go for a walk. I'll go in a walk in a circle around my apartment for 15 minutes. I'll do yoga for 15 minutes, or I'll eat for 15 minutes. And that's really it, because that's what seeps in my brain the best. And the last thing I'll say that I stopped doing is setting my Pomodoro method into play. Like say I'm doing a 35 minutes of just straight studying. I think your name is Narisa. You asked the question about if I time myself during diagrams. In a really early stage of my studying, I would set a timer for 35 minutes. Oh, cool, Narisa. So in the earlier stage of my studying, I was setting timers for 35 minutes, no matter what I was doing. I don't know why, but number one, it's a good amount to study for and to keep your focus, and then take a 5-minute break. And so say I was doing my deconstructed diagramming, where I was doing all my diagrams, covering it up with a sticky note, and answering all the questions based off of that. Again, that helps you find the gaps in the way you're diagramming, and it also helps you get into the rhythm of diagrams. And there's a separate rhythm for answer choices. Those are kind of two different skill sets in my mind. So it strengthened the muscle memory of both. Anytime I sat down, I was setting a timer for 35 minutes. If I only got one diagram done, then I only got one done, and I got 5 minutes break, and I sat down again for 35. And then maybe I did a few more things. Maybe I had like 35 minute and I could do 20 logical reasoning questions. It didn't matter what I was doing, but for the first, I don't know, I can't remember, like 3 months, 1 month, whenever I was just studying for the LSAT, I was just studying in 35-minute chunks. It made me get used to what 35 minutes feels like. It made me get used to not breaking focus for 35 minutes. This last thing I'm going to say is kind of weird, everyone, but stick with me. When the 35-minute timer is on, I'm not going to the bathroom. I'm not standing up and going to the bathroom. I'm not answering the door. I'm not looking at my dog if she wants me to play fetch. Like, the 35 minutes is on, it's on. And what's kind of weird is that it was weird to be like reading a textbook and setting a timer for 35 minutes and having, again, I've been a professional artist for 10 years. I'm not from like a daily desk job where I'm sitting at a desk for a certain amount of time. So getting used to that was really bizarre for me. Setting a timer for 35 minutes and just reading, maybe like reading on strategy on how to do a grouping game. All the time, I had maybe like instances of like, oh, I'm kind of thirsty, or so I have to go to the bathroom. And it's really early on in my studying, I started just using that timer for 35 minutes, and now I'm just better at that. So those are things I stopped doing. Those are things that I think really work. I have a million other things, but that's all I really have for today.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.